I'm super happy that we've got Arne Duncan, who can be a part of this conversation. Arne Duncan obviously worked in the Obama administration in charge of education, I think from 2009 to 15. Before that, he was in charge of the Chicago public school system, distinguished himself there as a real champion for reform and for equity and inclusion. And I know has been watching this situation with a special sense of concern and insight and understanding, now working with the Emerson Collective. So, working with some of the smartest and best people in the country who care about education. Good to see you, Ms. Secretary. And I always want to hear from you on these issues. It must be heartbreaking to you to hear from those young people, their struggle. You think about the little ones, K through third grade, who are still learning how to read and now to figure out to do that in a remote way. What's top of mind for you as you think about things that we could be doing better to amplify some of these bottom-up efforts?
I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for all of your leadership. And I'll tell you, just my range of emotions listening, it's inspiring, it's amazing, but I just have to be honest, Van, it just breaks my heart. And we shouldn't be in this position. And our students are working so hard, our parents are working so hard, our teachers are working so hard. And I'm always going to be honest, just the lack of federal leadership here is just devastating. We should not be struggling like this. And the lying, the dishonesty, the cover up has caused tens of thousands of additional people across the country to die. I'm sure you've lost friends. I've lost 2 friends. I've had 2 of my staff here in Chicago get sick. I had a friend lose 2 fingers, amputated, dealing with all kinds of very, very complicated health issues. And we shouldn't be in this situation. This was a natural disaster that morphed into a man-made catastrophe. And so here we are. And, we're going to be approaching, 200,000 people dead soon. We have a start of a school year that is wildly suboptimal for everybody. Nobody didn't want to go back to school, teachers, students, parents, but it wasn't safe to do so in the vast majority of places. So what can we do, or what are people doing? I'll just give you some examples. Again, for all the devastating lack of leadership at the federal level, what we're seeing at the local level has been extraordinary. I think there are 3 priorities, and your students answer the questions well. First for me is food distribution. And I've done a weekly call with school leaders and nonprofits across the country every week, starting in March. And to see schools, as you know, aren't just educational centers or social safety nets, to see schools continue throughout the pandemic and now to feed children and their siblings and parents tens of millions of meals every single day has been extraordinary. See them, one system breaks down, one supply chain breaks down, figuring out together, that's been remarkable. Secondly, and the student from Montana talked about this, Opal, so clearly, this mental health issue is so real. Everybody's struggling. Kids were struggling with trauma before this. Now, kids whose families may have been living paycheck to paycheck and doing okay, their whole world's been turned upside down as parents have lost jobs. And so telehealth, counselors, social workers, psychologists, teachers checking on children every single day is huge. And then the third piece is obviously the education piece. But for me, it's sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Let's feed people first. Let's keep doing that. Let's take care of their social and emotional needs. And then let's work educationally. In terms of local examples, I have so many stories. Yeah. Guilford County, North Carolina, where they videotaped with their best teachers basically the first 3 weeks of lessons. So the best teachers were teaching to everybody. They're using class time to do individual one-on-one instruction, tutoring to help people catch up. Here in Chicago, they've given out 100,000 devices, Boston, 30,000 devices. In San Antonio, we're a very poor district. My friend's the superintendent there, 49,000 children. They've given out 47,000 devices. South Bend, Indiana, using buses to create Wi-Fi hotspots in poor communities. Obviously, we don't just need technology, we need access to Wi-Fi in the internet. School districts doing wellness checks, going to people's homes, checking and seeing how they're doing. And then in LA, and we just obviously had a great conversation with a student board member from LA, one of the most ambitious efforts with the school district itself, and I'm co-chairing this committee with the superintendent there, is trying to test and then contact trace and then quarantine if need be every single child in the LA public schools. It's a wildly ambitious effort, but they have to do it. The fact that 15,000 school districts are trying to figure out how to become public health leaders, When that's no one's core competency. Again, I can't tell you how angry that makes me, but just the level of innovation, the empathy, the compassion, the humility at the local level, Van, has been nothing short of extraordinary.
You know, I also admire the kind of bottom up innovation and that kind of stuff. And in particular, I wanted to talk with you about a couple things. And you mentioned that with regard to Los Angeles. It seems to me that the biggest breakdown, the biggest mistake at the federal national level was not prioritizing testing, tracking, and tracing from the very beginning. There seemed to be a concern that, well, if you have too many tests, you might have too many positive outcomes. That might scare the stock market. That might panic people. And so we're just not going to test. And we can't go back, but we can go forward. Can you talk a little bit about how smart it is? I'm actually happy to be here in LA. How smart it is in Los Angeles to focus on testing kids, tracking and tracing. I would imagine at some point you get enough of a handle on where this virus is and where it's not. You can maybe the tests become a way to open the schools back up and begin to give us a little bit more access. You might see it differently. No,
it's the only way. Again, this pandemic doesn't know, kids versus adults. It doesn't know red versus blue. Always school districts, schools aren't bubbles. They're not islands. They reflect their communities. And the only way we can open schools safely is to reduce the positivity rates, reduce the virus, beat it down in our communities. And absent that, it's simply not safe to open schools. And so for me, it's always three things. It's got to be public health first, public education second, and then reopen the economy third. And at the federal level, national level, they tried to go about that in a very, very different order. And that has had disastrous effect. And so we have to test at that local level, fast, reliable, safe, and then we have to contact trace and then quarantine those where it's not working. The goal, Van, is not to open schools. The goal is to keep schools open.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about it is sometimes we get trapped in these, false dynamics or false debates. The economy can't be opened up and remain opened up. The schools can't be opened up and remain opened up. Nothing can be opened up and remain open up until we are able to test and figure out who's got it and who doesn't. The reason we have to shut everything down is this thing is asymptomatic in 40% of the people. So we don't know who's got it. You got asymptomatic spreaders. You got people who don't know they're sick and other people sick. That's the big problem. If you had testing for all, COVID testing for all, test for all, everybody would then know what their results are. And then the people who have it can stay home. The people who don't can go to work and school. So it seems to me that the answer for the people who want to go with the economy first, who want to go with education first, who want to go with public health first, is the same answer: test for all.
Well, you're way too smart and way too logical. and again, that's what, we could laugh, but honestly, I want to cry. I'm so furious. I can't articulate how angry I am, because what that takes, it just takes some hard work. It takes some honesty. It takes some transparency. It takes sticking with it. It takes, adjusting over time. We've learned every single week with this thing. And unfortunately, we just have leadership in Washington that has no interest in any of those. No interest in truth, no interest in hard work, no interest in transparency. And the worst thing, man, is this.
I know, I can guess what political party you're in.
well, I don't. For me, this is truly nothing Republican or Democrat. This is just about saving lives. There's nothing partisan about public health. There's nothing partisan about public education. We just have to save lives. And for me, what's so devastating is we have leadership in DC that truly doesn't care if kids or teachers or parents live or die. There's no body count high enough that would make them pay attention to science. That's why this local leadership is so critical to trying not just to educate, but to save lives now.
Well, listen, the good thing about, and the bad thing about the situation is that we're all in the soup together, red and blue, black, white, brown, we're all in the soup together. Obviously, you and I are in the same political parties. We see things the same way. There may be other people who are watching this who see it very differently, but the reality is there are some common sense things. I agree with you on the testing. I want to ask you one more question about another common sense thing that would be good for now and also good for later. So many people have commented on these disparities around access to broadband, access to devices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Talk a little bit more about what we're learning about, and you mentioned that people are using buses to get the hot spots and all this sort of stuff. Talk a little bit more as you look out on the national scene and survey it, what you see in terms of smart bottom-up approaches on that, and then what could be done at a federal level if we got our act together. Just talk about both ends of that.
Yeah, so what I've said is that for me, the goal is not to go back to quote unquote normal, whatever normal means education, because far too many children, millions of children weren't being served well
Right.
here across America. And so for me, it's about reimagining, reinventing public education. Same thing. I'm not looking to defund police, but I'm looking to reimagine and reinvent, what's happening with police forces. So what this pandemic has done, for better or worse, it has just absolutely exposed the massive inequities that exist in our country across every system, and education being a big part of that. And so, yes, why aren't devices and access to Wi-Fi as ubiquitous in our country, Van, as access to electricity and water? And you start to think about, why should a kid just be able to learn, 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, 9 months in a year in a brick and mortar building? And whether it's in Compton, LA, whether it's in inner city Chicago here, whether it's in Appalachia, whether it's on Native American reservation, I want every kid to be able to learn anything they want, anytime, anywhere. I want them to be able to find their passion, follow their genius. And they have to have access to technology to do that. Again, their mind shouldn't be trapped in a bricks and mortar building. And if we close these, I call them opportunity gaps, not achievement gaps. If we close these opportunity gaps, then that talent, will just have this chance to blossom and bloom and flourish. Absent that, things like technology actually exacerbate the divide between the haves and the have-nots. The other thing I think we need desperately coming out of this, Van, is a massive national tutoring initiative. We've had so many kids fall behind during the COVID slide in March and April and May and June. And then the summer slide, we have to help those kids catch up. Tutoring has been so researched, been proven to be so effective. Again, physically, virtually doesn't matter. Let's help those kids that have missed 4, 6, 8, 9 months of quality education. Let's help them catch up. And if we don't, they fall behind to a point where they may never be able to catch back up. So there's some things we can do if we have some courage that would actually catapult education forward.
Now, I've heard about a lot of great ideas. That's a great idea I've not heard about before, is a national tutoring initiative. Brag on the people who are doing, you mentioned people who have buses in the hotspots. Talk about the hotspots a little bit, but then come back and tell us more about this national tutoring initiative as an idea. But
well, and again,
hotspots.
And I think this is so important on the tutoring part, just the person who's doing this the best and happens to be a Republican governor, who's a good friend, former Governor Haslam of Tennessee, has just personally funded about 1,000 tutors across Tennessee to help kids catch up. That's great as a private citizen. He has the resources to be able to do that. But I've been advocating for $200 billion from the federal government to invest in public education, more PPE, more custodians. If we truly wanted schools open, we would have created an environment where it's possible to open more bus drivers if we need it, whatever it might be. But you think about all the recent college grads who are struggling to find jobs in the job market. You think about retirees and retired teachers. Think if we had a core of, just 500,000 tutors across the country. They're working with the kids who are most at risk, most marginalized, most vulnerable. We know exactly who they are and giving them a chance to catch up and get back on grade level. That's the kind of thing, if we had leadership and vision at the federal level, we could do that across the country in all 50 states.
Well, I'm seeing some stuff here in the chat. If somebody says you want to be a tutor, at least here in LA, you can go to stepuptutoring.org. So that's one thing. Also, you can go to backtoschoolsolutions.us to learn even more of some of these great ideas that you're talking about. I know that the Dream Corps, which is thedreamcorps.org, is working on a kind of a broadband for all kind of a policy play. But I was so fascinated by what you said. Please go back to it about people using buses for hotspots. That's nuts. I love that.
It's not nuts. It's creative as heck. And again, people just in solving problems. So, I'll back it up. People going back to the start of COVID in March and April, we're delivering meals via bus routes and then dropping off homework and then picking up homework the next day and dropping more meals. So people just thinking about these things in such different ways. You can buy hotspots, you can do that. But what South Bend, Indiana did is in the poor communities where they don't have access, we know that they're parking their school buses there in those communities that are Wi-Fi enabled to create hotspots for the entire community. So just, again, across the country, local leaders are thinking, they're problem solving, they're talking to each other. They're failing fast and learning from it. There's no competition. And again, just talking to superintendents on a weekly basis, it's been extraordinary. There's no playbook for this. Nobody was trained how to do any of this. And they are figuring it out together extraordinarily well. Again, my frustration is we have 15,000 school districts. They should not be having to figure this out in isolation.
Well, I wish we could talk forever, because I don't know how you keep up the level of energy that you do, the enthusiasm, the optimism, the determination, your ability to bring people together is just unprecedented, unheard of. And, part of why we're doing this, whole hashtag Back to School Solutions movement is because there are great ideas out there. Whatever frustration we might have with any level of government, there's always more good people than bad people. There's more problem solvers and problem makers, but the problem solvers never get the attention. They never get the platform. They never get the support. You've always been, cutting against the grain on that and making sure that great ideas got where they need to go. I appreciate you. We're going to do this again and again. We love you. We need you. Keep up your leadership, and we're going to stay connected with Back to School Solutions. So thank you, brother.
Back at you. Thanks for all your leadership. Great to see you.